Hello and welcome to the Fall Start Fantasy Podcast. I am Cameron, and I am joined by everyone's favorite co-host, Josh Newshafer. How are you doing, Whopper?
I'm doing pretty good. A little tired. Just got off work. That's why we're doing this a little bit later than normal tonight. But other than that, I'm doing good.
Yeah, how was work?
Uh, don't know why, but we were busy in the last hour when we're usually dead. One of those days.
Have you been doing any more substitute teaching?
Did some yesterday, and then I'm doing some tomorrow. Looks like I am in charge of the ISS kid. That should be fun.
Okay, I like it.
Basically, I read and occasionally check to make sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to do.
I like it. I like it. What class are you teaching tomorrow?
It's just in school suspension kid. They need someone
Oh,
to come
okay,
in.
just one.
Just one kid.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah, I get to read. That's all I know for that one.
what are you gonna read?
I've started rereading the Hunger Games trilogy. I got book one done about halfway through Catching Fires, so finish that up and then read Mockingjay after that.
I like the books. I like the books. I thought the third book was really strange. Um, it was
It
better
was,
than the third movie, but it was like a lot was happening that was hard to follow for a while and was kind of wild. But I liked
yeah,
it.
the first two top tier. Third one, it's a 7, maybe a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's jump into NFL news. Um, so the Cowboys, starting with probably the biggest news I think since we last spoke, but Cowboys traded a fifth and a sixth round pick for Brandon Cooks. Now, you mentioned Brandon Cooks as your bonus player on last week's episode. I can't remember, where did you say he was going to go?
I was hoping for the Chiefs, but I just knew they were getting ready to shop him. I had no idea where. I just hoped it was going to be the Chiefs.
Okay, I got you.
And I was definitely wrong on that one.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong. At least you knew that the player was traded. Coop and I's player, Zach Wilson and Corey Davis, have yet to be. So there's at least you're winning there. Um,
Hmm.
Other news: Patriots signed Mike Gesicki. We did not get that one right. Giants signed Paris Campbell and Darius Slayton. We all got Darius Slayton right, and I got Paris Campbell right. So I count that as 2 points to 1 point there.
In my defense, I thought he was Calais Campbell, so
And you gave a pretty good argument for why you thought he was gonna go to the Dolphins. It was nice.
just pulled it out. Just opened like, let's hope this makes sense and go for it.
The Bears signed Deonta Foreman. We had them at the Vikings, Cardinals, Bucks. So no. I guess Bucks also starts with a B. Do we give Coop half credit?
I mean, you're in the same division, so yeah, I don't know.
Colts signed Gardner Minshew. It makes sense for the Colts if they get through training camp and they go, holy shit, Anthony Richardson is rough. Let's throw Gardner Minshew out there for a few weeks. I think it's the exact same argument that Coop was making, where hey, there's going to be teams who are interested in getting um, Gardner Minshew as
Yeah.
their starting quarterback. So this would be a team where he
Stopgap
could play a few
quarterback.
games and go off. Yeah. Um, but we did not have him going to the Colts. And then the Jets. I don't know if you noticed this. This happened while you were at work, but they signed Miko Hardman earlier today, and then they traded for Elijah Moore to the Browns. Um,
Hmm.
they traded Elijah Moore in a third to get a middle to upper half second round pick.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, what are your initial reaction to that?
For Miko Hardman, I'm surprised it's the Jets, if anything. I did not expect the Jets, but for the Elijah Moore, I mean, heck, he was a stud for you. What was it, 2 years ago now for fantasy in our league?
Oh, it was this year. He
He
was
kept you
my guy.
competitive.
He was my
I
guy
feel like
this
two
year.
years ago, 2 years ago, he kept you at least competitive towards the end. But
Yeah, two years ago.
it
Yeah.
fell to me. He always fell to me on that one, but it's just weird because 2 years ago he was solid. This year everyone's like he's gonna be solid. Ends up being trash for whatever reason. Browns might have gotten the steal on this one.
Yeah, I think it's kind of good for both parties. Elijah Moore was playing like 90 something percent in the slot when he was on the Jets, which meant that every time they were doing two wide receiver sets, it was Corey Davis and Garrett Wilson. And then they were running a lot of running plays where they were using two tight ends, or so they were probably only having one wide receiver out there, and it was Garrett Wilson. And it was like they showed that they wanted to use Elijah Moore on the outside during the rookie season, and then they just stopped. And it was like they never went back to it. And it was pretty sad for Elijah Moore owners out there. Myself definitely one of him, as he was my guy. Um, I didn't have him in many best ball drafts. I thought his ADP was a bit high, but that doesn't get me any credit because I really wanted him anyways.
Mm.
Um, I think the Browns will probably also use him in the slot a bunch. Donovan Peoples-Jones showed to be an effective outside guy for them. I don't see why they would let Elijah Moore, who was playing in the slot so much, take over that job. And then Amari Cooper is still their one. So I don't think this is some resurgence for Elijah Moore, but I think it's a good opportunity for him to be worth a late flyer. If you want to go give a third round pick for him in a dynasty league, I think it's fair trade.
And something I just thought of that might be another reason why they did this is Aaron Rodgers intends to be. Maybe they're trying to stockpile another second round pick on there in the deal a little bit for the Packers, so that might be part of the reason.
That's
But I
actually a good
remember,
that's a good point. I don't Their second round pick that they had was probably pretty low because of how well they did. This one's probably a bit higher, so
I
maybe they're saying, "Hey, look,
remember,
we have this higher second round pick. We're not giving you a first, but maybe this one for Aaron Rodgers."
I remember correctly, they have picks 42 and 43 now in the second round.
Wow, back to
I
back
could be
second.
wrong on that one, but I think I saw something like that on Twitter.
What are the chances we see Aaron Rodgers as part of a package trade? Something like Aaron Rodgers in a sixth for both of those seconds.
I feel like there's at least going to be a first in there for Rodgers. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, so you got to pay the price.
Yeah, probably. I think Russell Wilson being ass this year really tanked Rodgers' price. Like it is no denying that now there's a lot of concern, and Matt Ryan also being bad, Carson Wentz being bad. And it's like now none of those guys are Aaron Rodgers level, but there's not a good track record to quarterbacks switching teams. Matthew Stafford might be the exception instead of the standard.
And if you want to go kind of a little bit of history, a Packers QB trade to the Jets it doesn't work out well until they get to the Vikings.
Yeah, I think he retired on the Jets again, like, and then unretired to go to the Vikings because he hated the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other news, Damian Harris signed with the Bills. Coop got that one right. Devin Singletary signed with the Texans. Adam Thielen signed with the Panthers. I think that was an underrated spot that none of us mentioned. A little sad none of us got that one right. Um, Austin Hooper just signed with the Raiders. I think that was a decent signing for them as they like to run the ball. And like Coop said, Hooper could be a good inline blocking tight end.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably in the most shocking news, Foster Moreau has to retire as part of his free agency medical testing that he's been doing. They discovered that he has cancer, and so he's hoping to beat that and come back to the NFL. But at least for right now, he's retired. Good news for Foster Moreau: he played at least 3 years, which means he gets part of the NFL pension, and so he's
Mm-hmm.
had no bad blood with Foster Moreau. Obviously not an exceptional tight end, but that's okay. Not everyone gets to be.
Mhm.
So,
Not
did you want
everyone.
to talk to any of those players? None of them were super exciting, but
Um, yeah, none of them were like really stood out to me too much, other than maybe Dalton Schultz to the Texans, because it was for basically nothing for what he could have gotten.
yeah, yeah, it
That's about
was
the only one that
basically
really
no.
surprised me.
Yeah, I think this idea that Dalton Schultz is a above average tight end, but he's not an exceptional athlete or anything, also was known by the NFL, and so no one was willing to give him the money he was worth. And it's kind of sad for Dalton Schultz because it's like, well, he doesn't get to go make a ton of money, but he was playing tight end anyways, and so it's a rich field. So
Exactly.
yeah. Any other NFL news you wanted to talk about?
None that I can actually think of top of my head, popping out at least.
DJ Chark was rumored to go to the Panthers, but that hasn't been official yet, and that was a few days ago. And then still no word on Odell, which would pretty much sum up our um, players we talked about last week. So let's go ahead and switch to a new segment that we have on the podcast. We're going to be talking about some rookies, doing the rookie talk.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen here is that Josh and I are going to each share 5 of our favorite rookies from this NFL class. They are all fantasy relevant players. I don't think you chose any defensive players, did you?
I didn't.
Okay, good. We're just going to go back and forth, and we've got a super extra special player at the end. Is that how you describe him, Josh?
That special.
All right, so I'll go ahead and start us off, and I'm gonna start off with wide receivers that I like. Um, and I think anyone who's been listening the last few weeks, especially, would know that I have shared my thoughts on this class that it is kind of a weaker wide receiver class, but it's not a weaker wide receiver class because the guys here suck. That is by far not true. Um, the problem is that there's uh, the guys that are available aren't the freak athletes that are 6'3", 190 pounds, run a 4.2 that we have gotten to see a few times in the past. Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, guys who are just absolutely fantastic talents. Those guys aren't here in this draft class. Instead, we get a lot of Devonta Smiths. Now, none of these guys are Devonta Smith's level. Like, I want a Heisman in the QB dominant era that we all live in right now, and huge credit to him. What what we really have is a whole lot of Tyler Lockett kind of players, and Tyler Lockett has been an amazing fantasy player for a long time. So I am super pumped about a lot of these guys. I think they all have a really high ceiling, and we're just not going to see the dominant number one guy. So if you're on a team that needs a number one guy to come in and step in and be dominant for your team, like the Texans, you're probably not going to get that. But not every team has one of those anyways, and they can still be effective. Think of the Chiefs this year. So the first guy I'm going to be talking about is North Carolina, and I can't believe I'm talking about North Carolina positively during March as a KU fan. That just feels blasphemous.
So how's that taste in your mouth right now?
It feels pretty gross. So let me say that North Carolina sucks. All their players are dookie, but Josh Downs is the guy I really like. Josh Downs is a smaller, shifty wide receiver. He tested really well at the NFL Combine, and he has a lot of potential to be that Tyler Lockett kind of guy. I think there's a lot of teams that will be interested in the back of the first round, maybe top of the second if he falls, that are going to be saying, yeah, absolutely, we will take a shot on this guy, and we may even see see teams trade up to go get him in the second round. Now, he's not my he's not a top 3 wide receiver in the class for me. He's probably my wide receiver 4 to 6 range. But he is someone that I think can definitely go in the first round. And when I look at the teams that are at the back of the first, I think that there's definitely some potential there for teams to go and get Josh Downs.
That makes sense. I haven't had a chance to watch any of his films so far, but basically how you've been describing it so far, it's like, next Tyler Lockett potentially. The question is, will he slide down every time he catches the football?
That avoiding contact is huge for these smaller guys. When Devonta Smith got hit during that Super Bowl, it was like, oh no! Like even as a Chiefs fan, I was like, I hope that guy is okay. And he popped right back up, but we'll see if Josh Downs knows how to have a long career. But we'll say it politely that way: have a long career. All right, I'll throw it to you for your first prospect.
Alrighty, let's go ahead. I did, outside of the special player that we're saving for the very end, decided to go one of each position, so I'll go ahead, kind of start with receiver like you did. And I watch a lot of Big 12 football, especially I'm a big K-State guy. I know football's fairly new to you in college as a KU fan, so
Yeah, not
you
used
don't
to
remember
this.
this guy at his you're not used to this guy back when he actually had this thing called a competent quarterback, but Xavier Hutchinson of Iowa State. He's actually got a pretty good size for him. I think he's 6'2", 245 or something like that. So receiver, he's not top end on the size wise, but he's a pretty good speed still nonetheless. Got good speed, good hands. I think it was 4.56, so not the fastest, but still pretty good speed in the end. And this guy was just good. The kind of way I put it is he's like a worse AJ Brown. A little bit slower, a little bit smaller. Outside of that, though, he just kind of reminded me, watching him, some of his highlights from Iowa State, especially this last year. If you're going to look at this guy, do not look at his senior year film for the most part, because he suffered from a very bad quarterback. If anything, look at when he still had Brock Purdy on it. That's when you can see this guy shine. There was a reason why he's still considered one of the best wide receivers from the Big 12 this last season. Obviously, what's his name? Johnston?
Quentin
CU
Johnston.
guy?
Yep.
Obviously, he was the star for the receivers in the Big 12, and then you have the, this guy, I can't think of something worthy, though. Outside of this guy was the best in the Big 12, and that's saying a lot for Big 12 wide receivers.
Yeah, I liked. I can't believe we're both starting out with players who are on teams that we hate.
Yeah.
You almost said something nice about Brock Purdy there. It was kind of at least not mean about him. Um,
I mean, he also had Pretty Saul on the team, so it's like Brock Purdy didn't have to do shit. He's just like, just don't throw an interception. I'm going to take a sack.
yeah, Xavier Hutchinson. He didn't test incredibly well. He ran a 4.53, which is pretty good. Um, it it's not bad. You want to see it a little bit faster, but he's a big body wide receiver. So there's going to be a lot of teams out there that are going to be like, hey, this 6'2", 203-pound wide receiver who can go out and get balls. I think I'm going to be interested in a guy like that. So absolutely very interested in Xavier Hutchinson. What round are you thinking he'll go in the NFL draft?
Because I know a lot of times they're going to base it on your last year of film.
Mm-hmm.
He did struggle just because of the bad quarterback play. I think that actually hurt him more than anything. I can see him maybe a late third, if not, he'll be a day 3 pick.
Okay.
Surprised me if he went very bottom of the second, if like a team really wants to reach for it, like a receiver needing team. Realistically, I see it somewhere.
Yeah, I think he's got potential to be like a Byron Pringle kind of guy, which that's not
Yeah.
going to excite fantasy players because Byron Pringle really had zero fantasy relevance ever. Um, but that's part of the scheme that he played in, and uh, more of he never really got the opportunity. Xavier Hutchinson is better than Byron Pringle, and definitely can catch better than Byron Pringle.
I'd say best case scenario, you kind of get maybe somewhat similar to Mike Evans.
Yep.
That's best case scenario.
Yeah. I was thinking like an Adam Thielen, but that works. All right. Next player, you mentioned him during when you were talking about Xavier Hutchinson, is TCU's wide receiver Quentin Johnston. Now, Quentin Johnston was playing with Max Duggan, and he made Max Duggan look like he should be in the NFL. And Max Duggan it has a ceiling of Zach Wilson. He is not a guy that I am at all interested in for the NFL, but Quentin Johnston's guy is I'm definitely interested in. There were a lot of plays that were left out on the field because Max Duggan, either the ball was inaccurate or the ball was way underthrown, or maybe he was thinking Quentin Johnston was running a different route, is how inaccurate these balls looked at times. But Quentin Johnston was able to adjust to the deep ball that was in the air, go out and get it, and then break off for a big run. In a class that lacks size and speed at the wide receiver position, Quentin Johnston is absolutely a guy that interests me. I think at his peak, he can look like a guy like CeeDee Lamb. Uh, there's definitely going to be some teams that will be interested in a guy like that. CeeDee Lamb's a bigger body wide receiver that can really be anywhere on the field. However, the problem is that he doesn't have the best hands. Part of that you can say was coaching that he was dealing with TCU isn't exceptional at producing wide receivers. So maybe at the NFL level, when he gets with better coaches, they'll be able to coach more into him. And he can definitely have problems with going out and getting the deep ball. When you have this big body wide receiver, you want to go see Moss players. You want to see him be the tough guy, go and high point that ball, bring it in, and catch it. And there are a lot of plays where he'll see the ball coming and he'll be like, okay, time to catch it with my chest. And you're just kind of like pissed watching him because you're just like, go get that shit. Like, there's a specific play where KU safety, I can't remember his name right now, which is pretty much all KU football players, where the KU player high points the ball over Quentin Johnston. And it's just like, what are you doing? Like, he's the safety. Like, you're the wide receiver. Go get that. But maybe he had a sore leg or something, or maybe he didn't feel like jumping. So there's definitely some concerns with Quentin Johnston. But what he does remind me a lot of is a guy like Christian Watson, where you see, hey, there's this guy who is a really good athlete, really good size, speed, everything that you want to see from a wide receiver. However, the problem is he can drop the ball. And Christian Watson definitely showed that he could drop the ball. And I think Quentin Johnston can be a similar kind of player, though I like him a bit more than Christian Watson. His drops aren't that bad, but he's also not the same athlete.
Again, speaking from a K-State fan's perspective, Quentin Johnston was terrifying during the Big 12 championship game. Now, granted, he didn't catch a lot of those deep passes, but you still have that fear of, oh shit, this guy has a shot for it. And luckily, kind of like you said, instead of high pointing it, he's like, oh, I'm just going to try to catch it right here. And it doesn't work. Now, granted, he's up against a pretty damn good cornerback in Julius Brents, who, I'm just going to say, because K-State guy did fantastic at the combine. He really rose up to where he might even be a day one pick.
Absolutely.
But that one of the better cornerbacks versus one of the better receivers. It was a good battle. Brents had his plays. Johnson had his plays. So he has that potential if he can just improve, learn how to high point all that a little bit better. Yeah, I can see him being like a T. Higgins.
Yeah. All right, 30 for your next player.
Alrighty. So I only had the one wide receiver, so let's go to the next. Actually, no. With his teammate, Quentin Johnston's teammate, Kendre Miller. So Kendre Miller, as far as running backs go, he was 5'10", which is kind of average. It's a little bit on the smaller side for running backs, but they're not necessarily big. If you look at Derrick Henry, he's like the exception on that one. But I'm going to put him as average size for a running back. I'm not sure actually what the average size is, but he's got good speed. It's not going to be like he's going to run for 90 yards on any given play. Eventually, whichever cornerback or safety will catch him. He's still got pretty good speed. He has a lot of burst. If you need a 20, 30-yard play, he's probably going to be able to get it to you. And he is very elusive. Not the most elusive running back from the Big 12. We'll be talking about that guy a little bit later. But overall, he was very good for the TCU Horned Frog team that somehow made it to the national championship. We don't speak of that game, but they still made it. Mentioned that part, but the way I'm going to describe it, just because of like how well he is also at catching the football, it's like a smaller Kareem Hunt. Watching some of those big plays he had, Hunt was not known for going 70 yards down the field and score a touchdown. He can maybe do a 50-yarder every now and then, but not always get away. So it kind of reminded me of a smaller Kareem Hunt. Elusive, not the top end speed, but still pretty good. Very good burst.
Yeah, I like Kendrick Miller a lot. He's one of my top rated running backs in the class. Um, I think because how deep this class is, his fantasy relevance is going to depend a lot on where he lands. But I think we're going to see players that go all the way down in the fourth, fifth rounds in this class that will have fantasy relevance. And Kendrick Miller's definitely a player like that. He tested. He measured 6 foot, 215 pounds at the combine. Didn't run the 40, but definitely high hopes there. I thought he ran fast in college. So
I said, just watching him in college games, he had really good burst through a hole. Just he couldn't escape from everyone if he found the hole and was able to run down the field. Eventually, they would catch him.
yeah, home run speed seemed to be a problem uh, with the Big 12 players. There was quite a few plays where I'd
Yeah.
watch Bijan or I'd watch Deuce Vaughn or I'd watch whoever else, and you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, look at him go! He just burst through that hole!" And oh, they caught him. like
Yeah.
they'd get 60 yards or whatever it is, but then they'd go down at the 2 or 3, and you're like, "Well, it's a little disappointing." uh,
So Big 12 usually gave it to them like the next play or two, anyways.
yep, absolutely. Big 12 was happy to run the ball in inside 5.
Hmm.
All right, so you went ahead and shared a running back. I'll go ahead and share my late round running back prospect that I'm really interested in. That is Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. A lot of listeners will already be familiar with this player as he did really well at the Senior Bowl. One of the standouts from that showing. He's a great fast runner, good home run speed, and most importantly, he can also break a lot of tackles. He was probably the top prospect that is not from the Power 5 conference this year, and I think that definitely Power 5 conference teams have an advantage, but there's no reason to say that they can't still be good. For a running back, he's a guy that absolutely interests me, and I know there's some concerns about his pass catching work. However, it's hard to tell whether that was he couldn't catch or whether the scheme didn't make him catch. You'd have to see at an NFL level what he does, and maybe at the combine they were testing that more for him. But I really do like Tyjae Spears.
So he was pretty good. He was a big reason why Tulane was able to beat K State this year. And K State had a Texas game, a good run defense. So running against that defense was not easy for any running back unless you're John Robinson. But yeah, he should be pretty good. Might be a day 2 pick. I highly doubt it.
Yeah,
How
I'd be a
deep this?
little surprised if he went in the third round, but I wouldn't say it's possible. But yeah, like you said, K State had a way bigger defensive line than Tulane's offensive line, and they had Felix Anaduke
Uzama.
Uzama,
I
who
say
was
Uzama.
I got through the first 2 names and then I just completely faltered there on the third one. Who's gonna go into the NFL and be an NFL starter? And it's like that's a there's a good team there on K State's defense and the run defense, and Tyjae Spears was able to put up great numbers against them. And obviously, K State finished the year at 11, right? So definitely a good player. All right, I
Okay.
will throw it to you for your third player.
Go tight end or am I QB on this one?
Let's go with QB.
Okay. So this is a player. I'm just gonna say this right now. If he's going to get drafted, it's going to be a day 3 pick. However, this is a guy I really, really like his tape from what I did see. However, he just has an injury that's kind of upped his stock quite a lot. Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. Um, I only had time to watch a little bit of his highlights this morning, went right before I had to go to work. But basically, he's a very good runner, surprisingly. Now, he's not going to be like a Justin Fields type runner or maybe a Cam Newton back when he was in college type of runner, but he's still good. He's got that mobile ability there. Throw on the run pretty well. A lot of his highlights, you see him throwing on the run. His pocket awareness was, I want to say, average. It wasn't awful, though. That's kind of what you need to see at this point, from that point of view. He had some pretty damn good looking passes. Um, Basically, literally the only downside to him right now is he did have an ACL tear to end his season. So, judging by most timelines, he wouldn't be ready till maybe mid-season, most likely. Slim chance for beginning of the season, most likely mid-season. So that's literally his only downside right now to me that I could see. As with some development, he could be a really damn good NFL level quarterback. Um, Again, I don't see. I can maybe see him going round 3 for a team that knows they need a QB. Maybe like if the Colts for some reason don't get Anthony Richardson, you can just roll with Gardner Minshew for a year, draft this guy. I could see something like that happening, like a team that's QB needy, they don't get their guy because for some reason, the Saints traded up and picked up Anthony Richardson. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something random there,
Yeah,
but
no. I mean, it's totally possible that a team jumps up to where the Cardinals are at 3 and then goes gets Anthony Richardson, and the Colts go, well, we are not that into Will Levis, and decides to go with Will Anderson. I actually saw a mock draft either yesterday or today that had Hendon Hooker as a first round pick. They said
that,
that the Bucks were going to draft him after trading down for some reason. So they at least that person was big on Hendon Hooker. I've seen him mostly right now as a second round pick. Uh,
yeah. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if he's a day 3 pick just because of that injury. You're not going to be getting any use out of him his first year or very little, if anything. At the same time, we saw with Jameson Williams, that's the wide receiver in
yep.
Detroit.
Uh huh.
If you know you can wait, take him. As long as you feel know, like, hey, I know this is not a year where we're going to be competing for the Super Bowl. Go ahead and take this chance to where you might have your franchise QB in the. He looked really good. He's going up against good SEC defenses, and he was able to torch them. One I'm thinking the most about is Alabama. He
Yeah,
fantastic.
that was the first time Tennessee had beaten Alabama since like 2004. So I remember when they put the field goals in the lake. Um, was a pretty big deal.
No,
But
like
Hendon Hooker, absolutely. I'm very interested in this player. I think that he does throw extremely well, but the ACL tear is absolutely massive to where his draft stock can be. And if they're looking at tape of this guy, they have now 5 years worth of tape. 3 years at Virginia Tech, 2 years at Tennessee, and it's like, man, that's a lot of tape that you have to watch this guy. Are you sure that you're like has he shown significant development every single year that you're like, yeah, we can keep developing this guy? Um, I I like him as a second round pick. That's where I would personally take him. I totally see a team like the Rams or the Vikings or even the Saints. Or even the Bucks. These teams who are going to be picking mid to late in the second round that are like, shit, the guy we got is not any good. Maybe we just take the second round pick, but there's a lot of problems with those teams too. So there's definitely a lot of what are we going to do, and I don't think we're going to see the let's just wait on the quarterbacks that we saw in 2022. Um, I don't think we'll be seeing any decent prospects going in the third round. So
Yeah. It's just that ACL that's literally the only question mark is how far does it drop because of it.
absolutely. All right, I did not have any quarterbacks, so let's switch to the tight ends because I've got two. And do you have two or do you have one?
Just have one.
Just have one, okay, because we got the super special player at the end. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna go ahead and start with. I'm gonna start with Dalton Kincaid, and there's six tight ends in this draft that are all phenomenal, and I mean that in that if you told me all six of these guys went in the first two rounds, I would absolutely believe you. Now I don't know if there's six teams that are willing to give up a first or second round pick for a tight end, considering how long they take to develop into NFL level. But these six guys are all special, and the first guy I want to talk about is Utah's Dalton Kincaid. And the reason for that is that I think for fantasy players, Kincaid will be the most relevant out of this class. Now, that is a super risky take to say. Um, it's like there's six guys that all have a chance to be the tight end one, and we don't even know their landing spots yet. But Kincaid to me shows the most prolific ability to be a pass catcher, and that's what's fantasy relevant. When I was watching Kincaid's tape, and I was watching him in the Utah versus Florida game because I was trying to watch Anthony Richardson, and I kept seeing this tight end from Utah, and I was just like, damn, this slot corner is just beating the shit out of this tight end. But when that tight end actually gets the chance to go out and run a route, I'm kind of impressed. Kincaid was not he was not used entirely in pass blocking. He was not used entirely the on the receiving. He wasn't running routes every time, but there was a drastic difference in which he should be being used for. So maybe the coaches needed to look at more of his film because when he was being used as a pass block, he was willing to do it, and there was a couple bubble screens that he was there, and he'd see the cornerback, and he just hit that guy, and the corner would be like, just why did you hit me? But it didn't move me much. But Kincaid definitely has a willingness to go out and be the pass blocker. So I think there will be teams that will be like, yeah, we'll give that guy a shot and make him pass block, see if he can develop. But what he's got is really good hands. He can catch better than any other tight end in the class, and that's what's important for fantasy.
Yeah. I kind of remember seeing some of his plays, and they were pretty good, but I usually don't watch a lot of Pac-12, and I didn't have a chance to like look up all these players that you also wrote down as well, because I was a bit on a time crunch this morning when I was looking at some of the film. But just based off the way you describe him, kind of reminds me of, in the right circumstance, anyways, kind of like a Kelsey, where not going to be inline tight end. You're probably more like a slot receiver most times, more often than not. So as far as fantasy goes, yeah, he's probably at least has a good shot at being the most relevant if he can utilize his talents the best.
Yeah, Utah's quarterback liked to leave the pocket pretty early, very common of college quarterbacks, and so you would see a lot of improvisation come from the team, and Kincaid would almost recognize it before the quarterback would leave the pocket and be like, "Oh, it's about to go down," and he would go get to the right spots on the field that looked good for the quarterback to give him a chance. And the quarterback wasn't the best, so he didn't give him the chance every time. But at least you saw potential, and maybe at NFL level, they would be able to hit that throw. So, all right, give us tight end number two.
Alrighty, so I decided to go with a guy. He's still, I think he's considered one of the top six, kind of like you were saying, but I'm not exactly sure where he ranks in there because it obviously depends person to person. Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State. Uh, okay, and I watched this film. I didn't look at his measurables because I forgot to look those up. Whoops. But at least compared to the people he was going up against, he looked like he was a big boy. Um, Hard to take down. A lot of his highlights are like three different guys trying to take him down, and finally, when the fourth guy gets there, they can take him down. Just takes a while. For a guy that big, he's actually got pretty good speed. A few of his highlights had him actually breaking away from defenders, which I'm like, how the hell does a big boy like that move that fast? This does not make sense. He's got good speed, good hands as well. Like he's not probably the best pass catcher. That's probably going to go to Kincaid, but overall pretty good at least. Um, Actually reminds me a little bit of Gronk. Gronk was a bigger an inline tight end, traditional tight end, if you want to use that term. And he definitely reminds me of that. So put him in a situation like, say, I'm trying to other good running teams I can think of having a tight end. Let's just say for some reason Titans wanted to draft him. And I know for all the Jigga fans, I think I said this right. It's going to hurt. It's going to be very sad, but let's just say that scenario happened.
It's not unheard of that they would get a two tight end set. 12 personnel is not something they shy away from there.
Exactly. It would be a very good compliment because I can say, to me, Chico is more of a Kelsey-esque kind of tight end in the right circumstances anyway. So
yeah, receiving is really what he brings to the team. It's not blocking much.
Yeah, this would kind of give you that good 1-2 punch that you honestly could want from your tight ends. And worst case scenario, because I know towards the end of the season they were using Chico as a fullback. Here you go. Here's a big boy. You could probably do your fullback and use Jacob Conquo on the end of the end, whatever you want to do with him. Big boy, or to take down, good speed for a big boy.
Yeah, I remember the Ravens when Mark Andrews broke out. They already had Hayden Hurst, who they liked a lot, and then Mark Andrews was like, "Hey, I'm amazing," and they went, "Okay, you get the ball more." There's definitely opportunities for multiple tight ends to become the guy, and just because the guy's already there doesn't mean he's the best option. I am a massive Tucker Craft fan. South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, man, they're fun. I like rooting for these schools that aren't as well known. Kansas fan in football, we don't get a lot of fans either, so I understand their pain. He's just good at so many things, and the production he was able to put up in college at such a small school is really impressive. I really really like the guy. If you told me he went in the second round, I'd be so in on that player. But I feel that way about like all six of these guys. So,
Yeah.
Speaking of the next guy, you talked about good size and a big boy. Well, here's a big boy. Tight end out of Georgia, Darnell Washington. I know there's going to be some fans that are going to be like, why didn't you talk about Michael Mayer? Because Darnell Washington is way cooler of a prospect to talk about. Darnell Washington is 21 years old, so he's now legally allowed to chug a beer. Congrats. 6'7", 264 pounds, and ran a 4.64. That is a big boy who is going to slam people into the dirt. And
it's not fair.
It is not fair. This guy, when you look at his measurables, you're like, oh, he's the tackle, right? I mean, that is a huge guy on the end of this line. That has to be their offensive tackle. Maybe a guard. No, that's their tight end who can catch the ball and then will just bully down some people. When I look at what he's doing, I got to watch a lot of Georgia games because, well, Georgia was very good. Especially in that Ohio State game that I was watching, there was quite a few plays where Darnell Washington would get the ball, and he's not explosive. 4.64 isn't the greatest of speeds, obviously, especially at the NFL level. But given his size, it's enough that he can go out and keep running and be hard to take down. I am very interested in Darnell Washington.
Say, I will have one critique on him because size-wise, measurables-wise, film-wise, he's a stud. There's no other way to put it. He's a stud. This is something I even saw on Twitter, and as a lineman coach, I can't remember. I think it was for a college team, and he has pointed it out. Everyone's seen that video of him on the sled just pushing that thing. He probably could have pushed it for a mile if he wanted. Something that the guy pointed out I didn't notice the first few times I watched it, but it's one of those like, oh yeah, because of how big he is, he's probably going to be used for blocking a decent amount. And what you don't see in that video is him actually push his hips through. As a former lineman, that's what you're taught to do. Basically, make contact, get your hips up, get them through, and start pushing them that way because you're keeping them in place that way. The way he was blocking, it looked like he was more or less leaning on it and just pushing that way. So, at this level, NFL level, if he's going up against, say, who's a mediocre DN that you think of first thing?
Zach Allen from the Broncos.
He's going up against him. What do you think is going to happen if he doesn't push those hips through and gets his hands on him and stays on that way?
His weight's going to be off, and he's going to fall to his face.
Exactly. So, to me, the only concern I have is maybe some, at least blocking wise, like technique stuff. Obviously, this is something you can easily learn. Boy, they tried to get into play lineman when he was still in college, and he's like, "No, screw that. I want to be a tight end. I actually want to touch the football." If he can really improve on his blocking technique, guy's scary.
Yeah. He is, I think, the most raw of the prospects for the tight end position. He can be, he can either be a David Njoku or he can be an OJ Howard, where if you can fix the problems that we see at the college level, you can be something great. But at least we know that he was great on Georgia, and since they won the national championship, you have some high hopes there. Uh, they were running a complicated offense, and so I do have some high hopes for Darnell Washington. I think he will take that next step, which all of these players realistically need to take that next step. So buyer beware with Darnell Washington. Don't go use an early second round pick on this guy in your rookie draft. You're going to have him on your bench for 3 years. And you're going to be like, man, this guy's best finish is tight end 18. Takes a lot of time for these tight ends. What you want to do is let somebody else use that early second round pick on him, and then in year 2 you buy him. You go, hey, you've got this guy clogging your roster. Let me throw you a third round pick, and they go, thank you. And then,
so to me, I like from a dynasty perspective, worst fear I would have is the fact that they might use him more as an inline tight end, not often as a receiving threat. That's literally the only concern I would have from fantasy perspective.
yeah, we'll have to see. I do still like him as a prospect. He's not my favorite fantasy tight end so far in this draft, but if he goes to a team that doesn't use tight ends in the blocking, or they already have guys that they like more in that position and they need a pass catching guy, he's got a great opportunity, great chance.
He's probably got the most potential of any of these tight ends.
Yeah. All right, that is my 5, so I'm going to throw it to you for a super special boy.
Okay. You know me. I'm a big K-State fan. There's no way in hell I'm not talking about this guy. I gotta say, he is loose. His name is Vaughn. The State University. I'm just going to get the negative out of the way first. He's very small. He has the shortest. He has the lowest, like in terms of height, weight, yada yada yada. I think he's actually. He weighed the slowest amount of the combine. I know he had the smallest height. I'm not sure on the weight part of it.
Not the weight. There's been some tiny running backs.
Either way, he's a tiny guy. That's the obvious part. He is very small. However, what you're getting instead, probably the most elusive running back there was in the Big 12, which is saying something because there's some damn good running backs in the Big 12. I remember seeing Brees Hall even tweet out the other day, top 2 running back in my opinion for this draft class, probably number 1 being Bijan, or to assume anything. For his size, he is very powerful. He's not going to truck someone. He's not going to stiff arm someone into oblivion like a Derrick Henry would, but will be able to break a tackle or two. Because of his size, he's not going to be able to do it every time for obvious reasons. He is very small. But if they try to arm tackle him, there's a good chance he's going to be able to break it. You see it time and time again whenever you watch his film, watch K-State games. Try to arm tackle him. just going to break through every single time. Actually, I could not find any clips of him trucking someone. I could have sworn I've seen it a few times.
Thinking that myself, I was literally asking coworkers. I was like, man, Deuce Vaughn's like yards after contact is like the lowest of every single prospect, and it's by like a mile and a half. He is not getting much yards after contact. Part of that's because he's so elusive that when he does get hit, it's that's the end. He was already going to go down anyways, and they did a lot of, inside zone runs that weren't creating the biggest holes. So it was he'd get hit, you know, right as he's going down, and so he gets his 4 yards, great play, but yards after contact on that play is half a yard. So his numbers are going to look exceptionally worse, but uh, I swear there were plays where he hits a guy and just bulldozes him, Rashad White, Derrick Henry style, but I just couldn't find any in his highlight reel. Maybe they just weren't as frequent
Yeah.
as I remember them.
I looked and I remember seeing at least some, but I don't know what happened. Maybe they just thought it wasn't cool enough. But onto some other positives with him. He actually has pretty decent hands. Fortunately, just because of his size and how he ball usually comes to him, he has to try to catch like that, clap his hand style. It's about the only downside I can see of his receiving work, but he usually does catch it, so if it works, I guess. But a lot of times you would see him being K State's top receiver as well as runner.
Yeah, hey, that's exactly right. Deuce Vaughn, if he was 5'10" and doing all the things he did, he could be the number 2 running back in this class. And
He was
it's
doing catch
really
for
that
about
tiny of a
20.
difference. But
I think you can put
but
him ahead of Big John in that case.
yeah, you absolutely could. He's such
Could be
a
an argument.
phenomenal runner, um, an elusive and smart role. And then his pass catching, his routes are very simple. It's a lot of check and release. He's getting to the flat, or he's doing some pass blocking for a second, and then goes straight right next to the center and stands about 5 yards away and waits for the ball. And part of that is because K State's receivers aren't exceptional route runners. Malik Knowles and Brooks, they're both fast guys. They're both. I hope to see him in the NFL at the special teams. I seriously really like those guys, but they're not getting much separation. So there's a lot of opportunities for okay, I'm just gonna hit Deuce Vaughn in the flat, or I'm gonna hit Deuce Vaughn in the center of the field where he's just sitting there waiting for me, which is fine. Um, and so you see exactly what you're saying. He's clapping the ball. He's not putting his hands in the right spot. But part of that is that he's a running back, and what he's doing with the production that he's getting is phenomenal. So
I know one complaint some people might have outside of his size is his speed. He's not usually going to be able to break an 80-yarder. However, if you watch the game against Alabama, and granted, I don't know where the safeties and all the other quarterbacks were during this play. Um, Whenever you see highlights of it, they're pretty much focused solely on Deuce, so you don't see where anyone else is during the play. So I'm not sure how much of a start he had, for lack of a better term. He was able to break an 88-yarder against one of the best defenses in college in Alabama. So he does have that speed. It might not necessarily be for a touchdown, but he can get you a good 40, 50, 60-yard chunk sometimes. And you look at a lot of his highlights, it's exactly what they are, 40, 50-yarder chunks that he managed to break loose for a touchdown. So some of your faster DBs will definitely be able to catch up to him with his downside.
yeah, absolutely. Um, there is a little bit of a knock on him, and part of this is how awards work. Kendre Miller was the other big all Big 12 running back. It was obviously Bijan Robinson, and then it was Kendre Miller were all Big 12 conference players, and then Deuce Vaughn was the RB3. And TCU won more games than K State, so it's going to go to probably the team that did better. But I like Deuce Vaughn more than Kendre Miller. Right now, for me, it's Bijan, Gibbs, Charbonnet, and then after that, I'm not super high on Devon A. Chain. I think because of his lack of receiving role, I don't know if he's going to be the most useful fantasy guy, but I do think he'll be drafted ahead of him. And then there's guys like Ty J. Spears, who we talked about, and Tank Bigsby and Kendre Miller, who you could put around Deuce Vaughn's level. But I put Deuce Vaughn in that tier with all of those guys. I don't see a real reason that none of them impressed me enough to say that you're better than Deuce Vaughn, whereas Deuce Vaughn impresses me enough to say he might be the best running back in the class. So that's where I stand.
Clearly, it's sad just because of his size. He's not going to be even a day two pick. He's a day two pick. I'm going to be shocked out by his. Basically, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go die now because I got shocked that much.
Yeah,
he's going to be a day three pick.
Yeah, he absolutely
he's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's small.
Yeah, he is small. I think fourth round is where you're hoping he goes. At most, you hope he goes in the third round. That'd be cool. But it's probably not going to happen given the size. But I'd give him a third round grade. He'll probably go in the fourth or fifth.
With how deep this class is, realistically, I'm seeing fifth, maybe a late fourth. I'm hoping for at least fourth round. He reminds me, again, another K-State great, Darren Sproles. Sproles was tiny. Sproles was electric. He went to as well. Sproles, to give you some hindsight, was like maybe an inch or two taller.
Yeah.
Weight was roughly the same. So that would give you at least some kind of baseline. So if you can get day two, I'm happier than all hell. Realistically, I see day three, maybe, probably most likely round 5 or 6. Hopefully 4.
Yeah. And I'm about the same with him. Now, there is something interesting. I don't know if you have looked at this in our Dynasty Leagues, but no one in our Dynasty Leagues is going to be that interested in Deuce Vaughn. I think they're going to see him show up on somebody's ratings and be like, well, it's the third round. I don't know if I like Marvin Mims that much. Let me get this guy or, whoever the wide receiver is. Let me draft Deuce Vaughn. But you and I aren't going to let that happen. Now, in our IDP league, you pick first in the second round. You've got the 201. But in our podcast league, I have the 204. You have the 208. Will you be jumping to 203 just so you can get Deuce Vaughn?
Says I'm not going to jump to the first round to pick him up. I got draft picks to good players. I can trade up if I need to.
If Deuce Vaughn ends up on my team, and I don't know yet if I'm going to draft him at 204. If I see this guy go in the 6th round, he's off my board. I really don't care at that point. But if he goes in the 4th round, like I'm hoping he will, I think there's a decent chance I'm looking at the 204 and I'm being like, Deuce Vaughn, I think you need to get on my team, and I'm not trading him. You know I'm a big fan of him, so.
I will trade you if that happens, and that event I can't trade up for whatever reason. I will trade you my first for the next season, third, and my left nut. Maybe a limb if I need to.
Well, you heard it here first. That's how valuable Deuce Vaughn is. A guy who at best is a committee back in the NFL. But are there any other players that you wanted to talk about from this year's NFL draft class? Because starting in April, I think April 5th, is our first mock draft episode that we have planned. Are there any other players you want to talk about this week?
That I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. I have started watching Tanner McKee highlights. He's a quarterback at Stanford. I can't decide if I absolutely hate him or if I just a little bit hate him. Part of that may be that he just had a really bad game against Oregon, but that's the tape that I have. So hoping he impresses me with the next game that I watch. But I'll have a better write on Tanner McKee because he was supposed to be my QB5 in the class, and I am not feeling good about that take right now. So we'll see. But I think that does it for this week's episode. episode. You have anything else to add before we close out, Whopper?
Please don't draft Deuce Vaughn ahead of me. That's all I ask.
Well, we will be back next week to talk about why I will be forcing Whopper to trade up to the 112 to get Deuce Vaughn. And we're going to be talking about some last-minute NFL predictions and talking about some free agency. We will see you all next week so you can be ready before the ball is snapped. Thank you, and goodbye.